Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. I'm pleased to be joined today by Sarah Mitchell, head of our documentation department. And today Sarah is going to be doing, I think, a very cool presentation on storage. It's something we get in a lot of questions about, so I hope we get to dive into it. We are also here, of course, to answer your questions, and you could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Sarah, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And there's your screen with waffles.
All right, you got waffles.
All right.
Start the slideshow.
The touch of professionalism that we always enjoy here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Who doesn't like waffles?
That's true.
So anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome to the demo and Q&A. Welcome back if you joined us last week. Welcome if this is your first time. I'm excited that you are all here. Before I start, I would like to remind everyone DevCon 2021 is coming up. And I'm going to remind you all every time I do a presentation until after DevCon 2021 passes. So if you don't know what DevCon 2021 is, it's our annual user conference where we talk about new things we've added to Alpha Anywhere. We do some training on how to do some of the more basic stuff and do a roadmap, and you get a chance to talk with the developers, and it's a lot of fun, and I hope you can join us this year. So today, as promised last week, we are talking about storage. We're talking about storage connections in Alpha Anywhere specifically, and all of this is about saving files in your web and mobile applications. So I wanted to start first by talking a little bit about what we mean by files and kind of looking at the options you have when you want to store files in your apps. When we say files, we're talking about documents like spreadsheets or PDFs or Word documents or PowerPoint presentations, text files, that kind of stuff, images and photos, video and audio files that you may capture in a mobile device, and then also generating and saving reports with Alpha Anywhere. Those are a way to get files in your app and to store them. And with regards to files, there are several ways you can save them, and I've broken down the three major ways here. The last two are actually the same thing, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is. But there's also this first option, which a lot of people do think about doing, and storing files in a database. And there are use cases where that is totally valid. But what you see more commonly is people storing their files on a disk, on the server itself, or using a third-party file storage service like Amazon S3. So I want to talk briefly about the pros and cons of these methods, and I'm lumping them into two groups, the database and then storing your files outside of a database. And with databases, there are some benefits to doing this. You get easy rollback with your files because all your file data is in the database. If you need to do anything like a rollback or a restore, all that file data is contained within it. You don't need to figure out how you're going to handle that separately if something goes wrong. And because of that, files can't be orphaned. If you delete a record, the file goes with it. You don't need to worry about finding it on the server or storage provider and getting rid of it. And then if you do database backups, those files are included automatically. Now, that's not a lot of benefits when you start looking at the cons of using a database. They perform very poorly for files over a megabyte, which are quite easy to get if you're doing image capture. They increase your database size. The portability between databases can be difficult and is something to think about. The specific use case I found when doing some research on this is that if you've used file streams in SQL Server and you want to go to someone else, that can be very hard to do. Also, with regards to size, lots of databases have limits of 2 gigabytes. And if you need to store a much larger file than that, then you're going to run into a lot of headaches. Downloading your files is more complex because you first have to extract them from the database in their binary format and then convert them into a file type that can be downloaded into your app and then opened. And then you're going to see decreased performance across the board in queries on your backup and your restore because your data files are so huge for your tables. Queries are going to slow down when you try to query this kind of data. So there's a lot to think about on using databases to store files. And then in general, what I've seen is that a lot of people consider this poor practice or not best practice if you need to store files. But again, at the end of the day, your needs, if you've got small files, they're under a megabyte, and you're not doing a lot of data capture, maybe putting those files in a database is exactly what you need. So don't discount this as a solution if your use case seems to fit well. But in general, people are probably capturing images, they're capturing photos, they're capturing video, audio, you're uploading PDFs, you're generating reports. And in that case, storing those files on disk or in a storage service is going to be much more beneficial. You're going to have better performance because the app can go and just download the file from the server and not have to wait for you to convert it into a file to fetch. They're easy to migrate. You're just copying files between databases. That's a bit easier to work with than trying to figure out how you can convert your file streams in your databases. But of course, along with any pros, there are some cons, and with an on-disk and storage service, you can run into situations where you have orphaned files if you're storing those with a reference in a database and you forget to delete them. And your rollbacks are a little bit more involved if you need to coordinate your file data with your database data. But these are solved problems. So while these might not be great, there are solutions out there to handle this for you, and everybody is on board with sharing how they do that. So with respect to storing files both on disk or in a storage service like Amazon S3, Alpha Anywhere has a mechanic within it called storage connections, and they are very similar to database connection strings, Alpha DAO, which we talked about last week. And a storage connection in Alpha Anywhere is basically a description of how to connect to your storage service. It includes where on that service your files are saved, any credentials that are required, and the type of service that is being used to store your data. And as of this presentation, we have several integrations. We have Amazon S3, which we call the preferred integration, and I'll explain why in a moment. We also connect to Azure, Sharepoint, and Wasabi Storage. Wasabi Storage is Amazon S3, but the way they've structured it, it's a little bit cheaper. And then there's disk, which is storing on the application server. And I want to point out here that this is not supported on Alpha Cloud. You cannot use disk storage on Alpha Cloud because on Alpha Cloud, your servers come and go as they please, and we don't detect when you've added a file to one of your instances in Alpha Cloud and then try to capture that and save it in your deployments. If you haven't published it, it's not going to be there when your instance goes away. Or if a second one spins up and your query goes to that one after you've done an upload, the file won't be there. So we don't support disk storage on Alpha Cloud. And because we don't support it on Alpha Cloud, it's not available in Community Edition because you can only publish to Alpha Cloud in Community Edition. So I mentioned that Amazon S3 is preferred. Amazon S3 is the preferred storage system if you do not have a third-party storage provider at this time. I highly recommend using it. And that's because it's the only service that we have support for on both the client side and the server side in Alpha Anywhere. You can use Amazon S3 in Action JavaScript. You can use it in your xBasic scripts on the back end. The other three, Azure, SharePoint, and Wasabi Storage, you can only really use on the server side. That being said, we have built-in functions for working with those storage providers in xBasic. And I'll provide the documentation at the end of the day about where you can go and learn more about that specifically. There's a lot to cover in today's presentation because I want to talk a bit about how you set up your buckets and how you set up your connection strings. And then hopefully get into a live demo, which I broke just before we started. So hopefully that's going to be working when we get there. So to start, we're going to talk about making Amazon S3 buckets. And to create an Amazon S3 bucket, you have to have two things in advance. You have to have an Amazon account, Amazon Web Services account, S3 account, which you can get by going to Amazon's website. And when you sign up for that, you are going to be given an access key and a secret key, and you need to store that in a safe place because it cannot be recovered. If you lose it, you have to make a new one, which means anything that you've published out there using the existing access key and secret key will need to be updated, because they only give you, I believe, up to 2 max, and then you've got to recycle, or not recycle, but replace what you've got out there. So there's no way to retrieve it. They don't provide a way to do that. So make sure you save that when you make your account. So once you have your account, and these are screenshots from the recent S3 interface, when you go into Amazon S3, you're going to have this menu on the left-hand side, and at the top, you're going to see an option called buckets. And when you click on that, you're going to have an interface here. Yours is going to say 0 storage up here because you're not going to be working with an existing account probably. But what you'll want to do is click the create button to create a bucket. And then when you go through to configure it, you're going to give it a name, which I believe has to be unique to your account. You're going to pick your region. Your region should be the region that's closest to where your users are using your app, because in our client side support for Amazon S3 in particular in the list, we go directly against it. We do not take your data back to our database and then send it up there. So that's going to help reduce latency for some things when downloading images and stuff in your web and mobile apps. You're going to also want to make it public. So block public access is the setting, and these will all be checked by default, and you have to unblock public access basically for web and mobile apps. And that's just because of how, specifically with mobile, with how it's done, because all the file upload and access is done on the mobile side and not on our servers. All those devices need to have permissions to get to the bucket, and the way that we currently do that right now is to have your buckets be public. You will be asked to check a box that says you acknowledge that you've made your bucket public. So that's just a thing you'll have to check. And that's it on the setup when you're setting things up. After you've set it up, you're going to want to go and click on your bucket name in the list of buckets and go to the permission section, because the last thing you need to do is create a CORS policy. And that CORS policy we have documented for you in documentation. And I'm just going to drop the link into the chat window now if I can find it. That's questions. There it is, chat. All right, and this just describes what applications are allowed to do when fetching resources from other origins, which is what happens in an Alpha Anywhere web app. You're on www.mywebsite.com, and then your app says, I need a resource from over on these S3 servers, and the CORS policy just defines whether or not you're allowed to do that, whether or not you're allowed to fetch a resource from another site. And that's what that defines here. And then once you've done that and you've saved this, you're ready to create a storage connection. So the setup's pretty basic and straightforward. There's not a whole lot to configure on the bucket side. I think the most difficult thing is probably making sure you don't lose your access keys. So, but once you've done that, you can then come over to Alpha Anywhere, and in the interface on the web projects control panel, under the tools menu, there's something called storage connection strings. And this is where you build your connection strings to connect your storage services. And when you click on that, you're gonna get a very similar dialog to the Alpha Anywhere DAO connection strings dialog. It's gonna have a list of connection names on the left side and a preview of the connection string on the right. I'm using pictures of this today instead of showing you guys in Alpha Anywhere, because we don't blur out the access key and secret key, and I don't want to leak that because I've got one here that I need to keep for other things. So when you're in here, you're going to click New. You're going to give it a name. In this example, I've named it Amazon S3. Once you've named it, you're going to click on Build. And then here, you're going to get the storage connection string builder. And what you need to do is select your storage provider. In this case, it's Amazon S3. You need to tell it what the region for that bucket is. You need to enter your access key and your secret key. Excuse me. And then finally, the name of your bucket down here in container name and optional path. And that's all you need to configure here. You can click test connection to verify that you got everything correct. We do not encourage encrypting the connection string because there are a few places in the UI where your storage connection can't be used if you do that. And then this encryption key stuff is if you want to do authenticated read, and I'll point that setting out when we go see it. But you need to set this stuff up if you do an authenticated read on your connection when you're saving your files or loading them. So once you've created that and you've saved it, you're ready to start using it. And there's going to be two examples I'm going to show today in Alpha Anywhere. They're both action JavaScript scenarios. And the first one will be uploading your file to Amazon S3 using the file upload Amazon S3 or Alpha Anywhere action. It's really easy to set up if you've already got that storage connection built. And the other one will be looking at lists, and we're just going to go do the live demo now. Okay. So I've got two pre-built components here that we're going to take a look at. And the first one is just this UX that's got a button and some static text in it. And in here, I've defined a file upload Amazon S3 storage or Alpha Anywhere server action. And if you're new to this UI and also to this builder, I double clicked on here, which opened the click event, which you can see down here. So the other way you can get here is to go over here to your JavaScript touch mouse pointer events and open this property. It's the same thing. And this event is available under add new action. I just come in here and I search for file usually. And if you come down here, here's this file upload Amazon S3 storage or Alpha Anywhere server action. And what this lets you do is upload a file to either Amazon S3 or your application server. So the first thing you need to set when you come in here is your upload target. I believe it defaults to Alpha Anywhere. You're going to want to switch it to S3. Alpha Anywhere isn't going to work on Alpha Cloud, as a reminder. It's going to ask you how you want to select the files. Either the user selects it or you provide some base64 data. We're going to use select file. And then here it's going to ask how you want to specify it. It defaults to name storage connection string. You can type out everything in here manually if you want, but this, once you've already set up the connection, you might as well use it. So here I've selected it. This is that authenticated read setting I was talking about. And then a few other things I've done in here is I've decided the allowed file types are just images, the JPEG, the JPG, and the PNG. And then I added an onUpload complete JavaScript that interacts with this static text object over here. And all this does is it gets the name of the file that was uploaded, which is in this E variable, which there's no information here for you that E even exists, which is why there's a commented out console log up here. But I take that and then I make this little HTML chunk that generates the URL to the image, and then I put the target name in there because that's the file name. And then a little bit of extra stuff in here. I tell it its maximum size is 300 pixels either on the width or the height, and then tell it to just grow as big as it can with width 100%. And then set the value on that static text control here. So if we live preview this, and I've got my bucket open here in another tab. Just reload it real quick. There we go. So this is that bucket I made. I don't have any objects in here yet. So just very simply what this does, you click that upload file button, it opens the file picker. We pick our wallpaper file here. I click the upload, and then what that does when it's been uploaded successfully is it just displays that image that was uploaded. And if we come over here and we refresh the screen, there's our wallpaper. There's our uploaded image.
Cool.
So that's a basic setup. You can get this to work with other controls that we have. We have a control called the drag and drop file control, which would give your users the ability to click and drag files in that they want to upload. It's a very common workflow that I've seen used in a lot of apps. And you're not limited on file upload to just images. This can be any file type that you want to upload into your buckets. There's also a few other actions in here that you have available on JavaScript and also on the xBasic side, which just allows you to do other things. Like in the case of upload complete, I added an additional piece to the workflow to show the uploaded image in the static text control. And there's, just as a point of interest, there's nothing in here. It's just I added a static text control and then that's all I did with that. So that's uploading a file. Next example that we're going to attempt is the list. So before we started this, I was messing around with my Alpha Cloud subscription test databases, which are included. And what I need to do real quickly here is I'm going to do it off screen real quick. Hold on. I just need to make a connection string for my MariaDB. Save. I had attempted to move this over to SQL Server right before the webinar and it's not working. So I'm going to come back in here and change this. And I apologize, I'm just thinking a little bit while I fix this. That's an awesome error. I wonder if it wants me to, I might need to close and reopen. The perils of preparing your demo at the last minute. Let's just do this from scratch. I think I have enough time. We're going to make a new web component. It's going to be UX component. And what I'm going to do here, because I'm going to keep this locally, we're going to make a new list. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to keep this as static data first. ID, description, and file name. One, no file, blank. Or maybe it's commas. Nope, it's bars. So we have this cool feature in here called convert list data source to a SQL database, and I'm going to use that. Oops. To make a SQL database. And I'm going to just go and use the demo database for my needs here. Click OK. So what this does, if you're doing prototyping, you can work with static data in your lists. And then this tool down here that converts list data source to a SQL database, you can use it to just convert your data into a table. So we're going to make a new table. I'm going to call it photos. Oop. If I could spell. There's not going to be any data in the target database. But what I do need to do is say this guy is auto increment. Let's just call this one ID. and numeric. And then description, we need that to be text. Unfortunately, the only options here are long text, so I'm going to grab those. And I'm going to click OK and OK. So now that's connected to AA demo Northwind. And it says SQL statement, but we're going to do that. Fields from a table. And we should see photos. There it is. Field list, ID, description, and file name. Okay. Return primary key. So here's our fields. File name is actually going to be our Amazon S3 file that contains our image. So I'm going to tell this it's an image. It's a name. And I think that's all I need to do here. We're going to add a detail view. I'm going to use the Genie to generate it. Oh, right after I set the field map. So we'll go set the field map for this. Create all new controls. After, we'll wrap it in a container. So there's our fields. On the list layout here, we're just gonna put this stuff in here, and then real quickly, I'm gonna tell this thing that it is a specific width. Let's see here. Inline style, there we go. Max width, max height, 100 pixels. Then next we need to tell this guy that it is a image. There we go. And so let's add one more thing here. Let's add a button. Update image. Put that up there. And this is our button that's going to call the action JavaScript to add our image to the list and store it in Amazon S3 for us. So let's look for image or file. No, I think we want photo. There we go. There's an action in here called image capture for list detail view. And what this does is it lets you capture an image either using HTML5, which would be in a web application, or if you're in a PhoneGap app, and I should say Cordova app, but it's going to say PhoneGap preferred. It will use the local Cordova stuff in your app. So if you set your image capture method to PhoneGap preferred, it will use the Cordova libraries if they're available. Otherwise, it'll fall back to base 64. And when you're configuring this for Amazon S3 storage, you need to change the data capture mode from base 64 to file name. And then it's going to ask you things like, what folder do you want to store it in? We'll give you a default name here. You could make that anything you want. It's basically the folder in the file system for your app where these things are stored when your list is displayed. So when the photos are downloaded from the server to display in your list, or even after you capture them, this is where they all get stored. And in the more properties here, upload folder, I think that's not quite. I think here we go, upload target settings. So setting this up, it sort of describes what kind of method you want to capture the photo with and how it gets stored on the device or in your web app. But when you go to upload, you need to set the upload target settings here from the server to S3. And now at this point, you can use your Amazon S3 connection string that you've created in your storage connections, and it will upload your files to S3 when your list is saved. I'm going to keep all the other defaults. Well, no, I'm going to turn off display progress because I don't have anything to connect that to right now. But just keep the rest of these defaults here. And then look real quick to see if there's anything else of interest. I think I'm gonna keep all the other defaults as well. Click OK. Capture S3. Okay, save that. And now we're gonna live preview that. But it's not gonna work because we didn't add any buttons to save our records. Okay, one more step. I'm gonna use add control to do this. List detail view buttons. All right. So the last thing we need to do is add the ability to save our records in here, create new ones, and undo. So I'm going to add new record, delete record, undo edits to detail view, which would be this section, as opposed to undo edits to the current row, which would be in the list, but not saved to the server. I'm going to do a synchronize, push all edits from this list to the server. We don't have any other lists, so I don't see a reason to use this last one. And I think that's all I'm going to get here. There's a few others you may be interested in, depending on how much manual work you want your users to do when working offline. The refresh list will refetch the data from the server when clicked. Oh, we need save too. I don't. Okay. So add those. I'm gonna put those at the top there. And I think I'll quickly wrap everything in a few panels. Let's do a panel layout today. And we'll put our list in a panel card on the left-hand side. And we will tell it to fill the container. And we'll put our detail view in a panel card on the right-hand side. And then we'll wrap all of these guys in a panel header, which is a container type. So if I come down to containers and pick container, pick panel header, done. And I'll also get rid of this container because we don't need it anymore. And I'll just reorganize these briefly. So save. We'll put delete at the bottom. So save and reset are going to be kind of off to the right-hand side. There we go. So there's all of our new record stuff. This guy has no file, so let's add a file. Let's update the image here. Well, let's go pick some other images. Let's see here. I need my C drive. Let's go use some old Alpha Launch images. Let's grab that one. So I'm going to save this. And now when I synchronize, if I've successfully configured this, it should upload the file to my S3 bucket. And it did not. So we're going to have to debug this a bit. Image capture and storage properties. I am blanking on this. I had this working today, and then I broke it. I apologize.
The power of the live demo.
Oh, oh my gosh. I got so close. There's a setting I ran across, and I could have sworn I saw it in here. And I feel like it's just not here anymore. But I could have sworn there was an option in the storage settings that let me pick Amazon S3 to upload. No, I'm blinking.
All
I
right.
got so close. I really apologize for that, guys. I swear I had it working.
You'll
Oh,
figure
I'm
it
so
out.
sorry. I'll
One
figure it
second
out.
after the webinar is over, you'll know it, and
I hope
we'll put it
so.
into the real video.
Yeah.
Next week.
Oh, that's too much word salad to read today.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, this is driving me nuts. I definitely saw something in here before.
Can we go on to a few questions?
We can go on the questions.
Fantastic. All right, so let's start with, at the beginning of your presentation, you said that Amazon is the preferred provider for Alpha Anywhere. Can you go into a little bit of details about why that is?
Yeah, it's predominantly because it's the only option you have in any of these.
When you're doing Action
uploads.
JavaScript, we've
it's the
written
only
code
one.
for you based on it being S3. Yep.
Yep. That's it. That's really the main reason.
That's the main reason, is you'll do less coding if you do it this way, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Wasabi is a similar placement, but you can't use. So Wasabi, my understanding, is a drop-in replacement for Amazon S3. So that the calls and stuff that you make to that API are the same ones that you do with Amazon S3. Again, though, not built in. The URLs or whatever are not built into Alpha Anywhere, though, to do Wasabi using these action JavaScript.
Right. There's no Wasabi option in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we do know about Wasabi, and it is one of the supported ones that you can use in xBasic.
It is. Yeah.
The second
and
thing
I
is,
mentioned the xBasic stuff, and let me.
Yeah, that was the next thing.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. Can you bring us towards the xBasic stuff? And we have a couple other documentation questions here today as well.
Yeah.
And some cool coding questions. All kinds of good questions, actually.
Ooh, good coding questions. We love coding questions.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to drive me nuts. All right. Oh my gosh.
You'll figure it out after the.
Oh, it was working yesterday too. Oh man. All right.
Oh, it's working. Let's mess with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's working. Let's change everything.
Let's change it.
So we're looking for storage.
Yeah. So documentation related to xBasic, working with storage.
Yep, it's all in the storage connections documentation. This is sort of your top level explanation of why, how, what, and down here at the bottom we have links to all of our functions you can use to get item information and so on and so forth. So let me paste that in the chat.
That's
window.
right. So these abstract like you don't need to know what service provider you're using when you're using these xBasic functions, as long as you
right. No, yeah, they just take they take the connection string as a parameter, which we've seen how to set up with storage. So here's like an example here. In fact, we can just copy this. In theory, it should just work. I come over here and do new xBasic script, and paste that in there, and we'll just showvar properties. And then showvar line count. Please keep in mind, showvar is not going to work on your web app if you publish it.
We have some questions about that too. Yep.
Yeah, same with like other things you might see, like uimessagebox show. They just run on the server. They open UI in Alpha anywhere. They're not going to do anything to call back to your they're not going to send anything back to the client. These are predominantly like a lot of the examples you're going to see in xBasic. If you see like a showvar or uimessagebox, that's intended to be run in a script environment like this. Mm-hmm. Amazon S3 run. No errors. Fantastic. There is one item, and it was the wallpaper we uploaded earlier in the example that worked.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So that's what that is.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So since you're already on the topic of things that work on the server that don't work, or work on in the IDE that don't work on the server,
yep.
Someone sent in an example where they're trying to use, they've got an Ajax callback from a button, mm-hmm. and in their script for the Ajax callback, in their xBasic, they're trying to use a uimessagebox or a showvar and a showvar expression. Mm-hmm. And those are not going to work because they would, if we don't let you do it, but it would try to open up on the actual server machine, not on the client's machine who made the Ajax callback request. Yep. So instead, what you need to do is
you need to send back JavaScript.
You need to send back some JavaScript. So
there's an e.javascript variable.
You can take us through a little quick Ajax callback example, because I know that as many times as we go over it, there's always there's always room for a little bit more review there.
There's always room for review on that. Yeah, let me make a new UX, cancel. Great. Web components. Oh, it's gonna make me. Did anybody have the answer for why my list wasn't working?
Yes, no. But they were not serious answers. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. It always happens. It would happen on a Wednesday. Callback. So I'm going to add a button here.
Well, there was something that said during setup, actually, someone pointed this out, there was something that said something about working with PhoneGap, but I think that was PhoneGap preferred. I don't think it was PhoneGap required for your upload example.
Yeah, it's not required if you pick PhoneGap preferred.
Yeah. Okay. So it'll know.
We can certainly try that differently, but let's finish this example first here. So
one thing at a time.
It's a button, double click to open the edit click event, add a new action, callback, Ajax callback. There we go. Okay. We're going to call an internal xBasic function. I'm just going to call it my callback. I'm going to click this button. Well, now I'm going to click this button down here and create function prototype. Copy it to clipboard, open the xBasic functions declaration, which is this button over here, paste it in there. And then if it's generated with comments, which you don't have to generate it with comments, but the comments have a lot of useful information in them.
Yep.
In here, you'll find one about how to return data to the client. So here's an example of doing that. My callback equals alert. The Ajax callback case, you return a character string, and that's JavaScript to execute on the client. There are other places, other actions that will use e.javascript instead. So I'm just going to copy this and move it up here and change it a little bit.
The basic premise for people who are new to Ajax callbacks is that an Ajax callback allows the browser to make a call to the server to run some sort of server-side code. What the browser gets back is a string, and that string is a series of JavaScript commands that the browser executes when it gets it back.
Right.
Okay.
And so I'm going to write return instead of my callback equals.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to put this out there for folks. You're going to see a lot of Ajax callback examples all over the place that use this method of the function name, which in this case is my callback, equals, and then like some text, or if it's a returns an n equals 9. This is an old style way of returning a value from a function. And we added support for return in recent history, like within the last 5 years. And so you're going to see both are correct, both work, both are valid. Return is a concept that's a little bit easier for some people to wrap their head around than assigning
and it's used in other languages as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's used in other languages like JavaScript. So in fact, in JavaScript, if you go and take your function name and assign it a string, your function is gone. You have a string now. So don't do that.
JavaScript.
Yeah, JavaScript's a pretty bad offender on that one. So we're just going to do this alert callback completed. That's what this function will do. Click OK to save it. Accept all the other defaults, save that, live preview it, full preview. And so when I click this, I should get an alert message that says callback completed, which is the JavaScript that got returned from the server when it executed my callback function. So if you want to return something like this to the user, that's what you need to do. You can use JavaScript actions to simplify some of your messaging and just call a JavaScript action instead of typing it all out in your callback. Or even just call a JavaScript function as a return from your callback. And I do want to show you how you do that. So let's change this to say show alert. And I'm going to cut that out of there. And then I'm going to come over here to JavaScript functions. And we'll just paste that alert here. Is var? I think it's var. Save that. Save. So we should get the exact same result we saw before, which we do. Yeah, but now I've moved all my JavaScript out of my callback, which actually makes it a bit easier to work with. Because writing, cancel. Like concatenating a bunch of variables and stuff together in a giant block of JavaScript and xBasic can be a bit of a hairy mess at times. So.
Very cool. Another question, is it possible to return an array from the xBasic server-side function? In other words, from your Ajax callback and pass that array to a JavaScript function?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
That was the question. There's nothing that stops you because that array can get passed.
Yeah, other questions about like, what do you want to do with that array? Because it might be easier to put your array into a state variable instead of passing around some JavaScript.
Yep.
And there's a chunk of code in here somewhere that shows you how to work with state variables.
Excellent.
In fact, here's the chunk of code that shows you how to do an array.
Oh, very cool.
With it's JavaScript. Right, there's populating color choices. I'm not seeing there's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah. Could you just show one more time how you created this prototype function? That has all this great documentation in it.
Yeah. So in your Ajax callback, there's a create function prototype. That will only work if you've given it a name. But if you click that, it generates this, and then you have two options, with or without comments. And without ones just shows you the JavaScript commands. That might be the simplest way to think about it. But yeah, this contains a whole bunch of stuff.
Lots of different examples.
Oh, yes. Oh, here it is. SI is the state information.
Terrific. Okay, so I'm glad you brought up servers state information, because we have a state and state variable questions. And it's as follows. I said that they've set up an argument under the server side's onDialogIntialize event. I said, but once they get into a new xBasic function, they no longer have that argument that's contained in E. In other words, that thing isn't there.
Yep.
But notice that they could set a state variable and carry it through to other xBasic functions and do it that way. But there's also the concept of setting up an argument. Would you suggest going the argument method or the state variable method? And then I have a follow-up question to the state variable method.
So I wouldn't use arguments to pass stuff around. Arguments are used when you first open your component, and then beyond that, it's questionable as to whether or not they're still available. What you should really think about is what type of information is it? If it's information that the client should never have access to,
right,
or you only need on the server, use a session variable. If you need it on the client, then state info is an excellent way to do it because it's going to be persisted on every callback and it's going to be available on both sides.
Excellent.
But yeah, session variables.
And the follow-up question is, can you manipulate that state variable through the Chrome debugger or something like that? I mean,
yeah.
You are clever. Okay, I see.
Yep.
So you can't.
Yeah, state information is available on the client and the server, and it can be changed on both sides.
Yeah. Okay. So session variable.
Session variable for data you don't want the user to manipulate on you. Yeah.
Gotcha. We went over why we prefer S3. The oh, good. We have a couple other great questions. So many good questions today. I don't even know where to start.
I think I might do a follow-up next week where I make the list work.
Oh, that's probably a good idea. Oh, someone did point out, now is Sharepoint, could that be used as a named resource or connection string?
Sharepoint, yes.
It can, okay. So
did I say Sharepoint? I think I did. I might have forgotten it.
I don't think it was on the list. And also the thing is there documentation for that, or does that still need to be created? Someone said they were looking for the documentation on setting up Sharepoint as their named resource, but were unable to find anything. You know what? I will make a note on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So normally documentation will get added once I've been informed on how something works, but it looks like we have a dearth, I think is the correct word, on information on SharePoint.
So the storage connection string, and you go, wow, I know SharePoint's in there, but it hasn't been thing. How do you report an issue to documentation?
There's a link at the bottom of the page. You just click it. Click that. It opens your email client, and then you send us an email.
Perfect. But
and then hopefully it actually gets fixed. Yeah, SharePoint.
It'll get fixed. You're pretty responsive to these.
It'll get fixed. Yeah, it'll get fixed.
It will get fixed. Okay.
I'll go and find someone who knows how it works and ask them how it works.
Yeah. Okay. Couple other ones. Someone would like to know, can they do a tooltip on a list item? So they have on a row in a list. So they've got a list control and a UX. And let me find the exact question here. And is it possible to have a tooltip that says something like double click to edit the contact details or something like that?
I think you can.
Mm-hmm.
I want that to work. I'm really hung up on this. Let's go look in here. List properties has, so let's see here. Let's go check out the events. I don't think we have an on hover. I
don't have an on hover yet.
I think on the tooltip, because I don't think we have a help.
I mean, part of it is, lists are typically, well, not typically, but lists are meant to be used on both mobile and web. And on mobile, there's no such thing as hover because it doesn't know that your finger is half an inch above the list. List item hover class name. Oh,
so let me, so some thought on this. So with CSS, there's something called content. And we're just going to make this guy here and go over to CSS. Show tips. Content. So content puts text in an element, and it's typically used with the before and after pseudo elements, which we talked about quite a bit in a webinar I gave a long while ago. I think in 2019, possibly 2018, but it's still relevant because it was all CSS focused. But content lets you kind of add content. It's strictly text content. You're very limited on HTML markup and that kind of stuff. But you could use this.
So it doesn't have an onHover event, but it does have an
so
onHover class, and that
class. You can do like a before hello. And I think I have to give it a width and a height. So, and assuming this works. Wait, oh yeah, it is invalid. Oh no, come back. I need a semicolon right there. There we go. Okay. Without testing this at all, in a list with no rows or just the one row. There we go. So hello appears when you hover. Now there's a whole bunch of CSS stuff out there that you can use to position that differently, so it doesn't move anything. So it overlays the top, but that is an option with the hover.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no onHover event, but you can, but there is an onHover class, and that onHover class using content will allow you to conditionally show and hide things based on.
Yep. And then the thing about content, Indian. And now it might seem useless, but content has the ability to display the value from an attribute. So what you could do in your app, just to take this a step further, is suppose here in description.
Yeah. I see where you're going. You can do dynamic, you could do dynamic content, right? You could say
you could do
you're
dynamic
on line
content.
25, you know, or something like that.
Yeah, so you could look at the attribute, and then the attribute could contain the text that you want to display. Getting a working example is going to take longer than 3 minutes, though.
Okay, that's fair.
Same with that list demo that just utterly and totally failed today. Excuse me.
Excellent. Let's see what else we've got here. If there's anything we can cover in the last 2 minutes.
I wonder if I can roll that back.
Here's a question. I don't think we can get it. We can answer it in 2 minutes, but it has to do with email attachments, and they're using the email SMTP open function. They can send email, but they're having issues with doing attachments, and they're wondering if there's if we could point us toward documentation or a video or anything like that.
On the email send SMTP?
Yep.
So attachments is a common or limited list of file names. It has to be able to access those files on the server. So like if you're on your application server, if you're self-hosting, then like a file path like cdev test zip would be a file on the server. Otherwise, you probably want to use like a URL.
Oh, okay. URL is an option for that? Okay.
Yeah, I believe attachments has to be an absolute path.
I see.
It might be able to be relative to the component or script file location that runs it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much. Thanks everyone who attended today. We are out of time.
I do apologize.
You're laughing at that. You know you're going to solve this problem in like 1 second. So stay tuned next week when Sarah shows you the correct answer to how to fix that file upload issue.
Oh, I shouldn't have touched anything. It was working this morning.
We have a whole bunch of questions that did not go answered, and I apologize we couldn't get to them. Do send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. We're happy to get the answers back to you, and ones that are good, we'd love to share with other people as well. So thanks very much, and we hope to see you next Wednesday at our next Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. Until then, stay well. Take care. Bye-bye.